Thanks for tuning in, listeners. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be doing this. And if it weren't for us, you would probably be listening to something else. This is Vaguely Scientific. I am taking a break from drilling for oil to say hello. I am Derek. And don't forget to wipe down the equipment when you're done using it. Joining me, as always, is Jim. Hi, Jim.
I got a rag.
Yay! And our guest this week is Australia's largest and most populous city. Welcome back, Sydney.
Hello!
Yay! Those are all puns on our names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get that until just now, actually.
Yeah, it took to the third one before I got it too. But yes, I get it now.
I was gonna go with, like, I think in England they call sprinkles jimmies.
Oh yeah,
I was gonna go with that,
jimmies.
and then I was like, "No, do you? Okay,
I've heard of that. Yeah,
maybe that would have been better. I don't know." But and then I was like, "Wait, Jim actually is a homophone,
right? Yeah,
for a thing." So
yeah.
Well. Okay, that was a behind-the-scenes look into
that
your
introduction.
Yeah.
We went into your brain forest today.
Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. So this is the show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers, and who knows, we might even get some of those answers right. But first, I think we should probably listen to Jim's fun science fact of the day. Jim?
All right. Uranus and Neptune are actually in their own slightly separate category of planet. They are called ice giants. An ice giant is a planet that's made up of materials that have freezing points over 100 Kelvin. So even though these two planets have a lot in common with the gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn, chemistry-wise, they are very, very different because they're made of things like methane and water and ammonia and other things that we would call volatile, things that evaporate very, very easily. So they're actually pretty different on their interiors. It's kind of neat.
And they live in Jotunheim, and they fight Thor.
Yes, those are all true things that have happened in our solar system.
When you said ice giants, that was...
I get it. Yeah,
Okay.
That was... these are Greek gods and Roman gods.
Well, they're Roman names, but yeah, that's fun. So these two are in their own so are these the only two in our solar system that are in that category?
Yeah, and we found a lot of others in other solar systems that are probably roughly the same type of thing, but it's still very, very hard for us to see what a planet's atmosphere actually looks like at a distance like this. But Jupiter and Saturn are mostly hydrogen and helium, so chemistry-wise, They are pretty different on their interiors, which I think is really, really neat.
Jupiter is the first one I thought was like, how come it's also big? And then I'm ignoring ice as a significant part of it.
Yeah, those two are still like full-on gas giants.
All right. Well, speaking of gas giants, it's a stretch, but we're going into it anyway.
It's not bad. You've had worse.
I've had worse. That is objectively true. I think we should talk about our first question this week. And question 1 is, why does campfire smoke always come right at me?
Spite. Yeah.
Yep. That's it. That is the answer.
Smoke hates humans and is just like, I'm going to make your eyes water and your throat dry. Here I come, ready or not.
You built me. Prepare for the consequences.
Exactly.
I love this. It's the modern Prometheus who stole fire from Olympus to give it... Wow, this weird mythological tie-ins here. I don't know how each of you approached preparing for this discussion, but I was thinking because, and feel free to ignore this, but because the actual physics explanation for this is really not that complicated, I wanted to tell you about a few of the historical misconceptions I came across as to the explanation for why this happens.
Okay.
Do we want to give the physics example first so that all our listeners know it? Because I didn't know it until I Googled this question.
I mean, we can, sure.
From my understanding, fire produces hot air rises, cool air is then sucked into the fire to continue to fuel it. And that's, how the fire keeps going. But when you sit in front of the fire, what happens is your body is creating like a semi-vacuum or a partial vacuum because it's blocking the cool air from wherever you're sitting from being able to go to the fire. So instead of that side and getting cool air, it's instead getting nothing because you're sitting there. And so what happens is the cool air from the other sides of the fire starts pushing the smoke towards your body. So that's the physics explanation as best I understood it, which I did not know was an actual thing until I Googled it.
Yeah, I was really surprised to learn that myself, actually. Yeah, because it's all about like pressure differences. And I was like, oh, of course, that actually makes a lot of sense. You can see it on a very small scale with a candle, but never thought about it before.
What's interesting is after I learned that, because I learned that a few years ago, but had a very similar experience of like, oh, I didn't realize how kind of straightforward that is. And after I learned it, because we occasionally do campfires at my house, and I started realizing that using that information, you can seat people around a campfire so that they are all equalizing the pressure and the smoke will go up. And I found it really interesting how many times I was met with people saying they don't want to sit that way and they don't believe me. And some people who still just adamantly insist it doesn't matter, the smoke will still come to me. And I'm like, but it won't. It actually
the smoke can't get you all at once.
Yeah.
Well, but then of course also you have like wind and stuff like that too that's going to change the airflow too.
But yeah, I think that's really interesting because that's one of those things that I did not know until we started looking at this question. And I learned it like today. And I think that's kind of cool.
Right.
The first thing that I came across was people saying there is, I guess, a common joke that people make that the smoke will always go toward the prettiest person at a campfire. And I guess this is usually said in like a teasing way. If somebody's saying, oh, the smoke keeps coming at you, they'll be like, oh, that's just because you're the prettiest one here or something like that. And that's a very old saying. And I was like, there's got to be something to that in terms of like where it came from. And I was kind of disappointed to find that I couldn't really find anything specific. The best I could find was various sources that suggest in Celtic mythology, they believed that smoke was inhabited by or made of fairies and spirits. And so it's possible that the idea is the fairies are attracted to beauty, and so they want to go toward the prettiest person at a campfire. But that actually comes from something that I thought was more interesting, which is an older saying that is smoke follows someone who is hiding a secret or guilty of something. And those were where the stories I saw of like the fairies would go toward somebody who is like hiding a secret because they wanted to expose it.
Okay.
So I didn't know that before, and I thought that was kind of a fun interpretation of it.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. I like that. I didn't look into any sort of historical ideas. I was just trying to think of some really funny ones that I would say to a person. And one of them was that you are cursed. And
yeah,
the fire is attacking you specifically because someone laid a curse on you or someone laid a curse on the fire. But either way, there's a curse involved. And so as a result, you were doomed to have the smoke at you forever.
I do like that idea of just a small annoyance as a curse. Like your curse is just smoke will follow you. Like what an annoying thing to have happen. Like of all the things that could happen to you, like there's just something annoying. It's not really going to affect your daily life, but it's super annoying and you can't stop it.
Right. Yeah.
It's like the idea of like rain always following you or technology glitching when you try to use it.
Yeah.
Like right. Or your inability to find a parking spot. Just like small little annoyances that prevent you from functioning how you want to function.
On that note, this is tangential, but I am convinced that the minor annoyance curse I have is that every time I go grocery shopping, the specific item I am going toward in the grocery store will be where a congregation of people have gotten together to block my access to that specific item.
Right, yeah.
That's my annoyance curse.
Yeah. Tiny curses, they're all around us.
Another thing that I found was from Japanese folklore, something called an Enenra. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But they are spirits or demons that are supposed to live in campfires. And so people believe that the smoke was kind of like the manifestation of them. And some of them are spirits, like originally, and others are human beings that have died. And what's interesting about that is it is supposed to be you can only see their true form if you are pure of heart.
Oh, interesting.
So in that sense, if the smoke is coming at you, it's the Enenra trying to like tell you something or reach out to you.
And then if you're pure of heart, you can see it as...
I'm extrapolating a little bit, but the idea being that like it would take a soothsayer or a fortune teller of some kind to like see them and interpret what they're trying to tell you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that tracks. I was finding some spiritual meanings to this question as well, and it was a lot of, someone's trying to communicate with you, someone's trying to tell you a message. There's a spiritual element there, so I'm sure that Japanese enra is where it comes from.
Yeah, I mean fire is a very, like, humans have this primordial idea that fire is in some way mystical. So there are so many times that it is used in like fortune telling or some kind of ritual like that.
Well, and also fire is used a lot in like dark spaces at nighttime to keep you warm and to provide light. And so like there's already that element of mysticism and mystery, and you can't see very well in the dark if all you have is a campfire, or torch or whatever it is. So there's that layer too. To fire.
And if you throw a handful of coffee mate into it, it'll sparkle, and then you can tell ghost stories.
Coffee mate, huh?
That's what they used in Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I know, but I forgot about that, and it's very funny to me now thinking back on it.
It's because it's granular and it burns well.
Yeah, I mean, you could throw anything granular into the fire and it would be fine, but like, boy, coffee mate was a choice. I appreciate it, though, because it's very much the kind of thing that a child would just bring with them to a creepy campfire.
And claim that it's magic storytelling dust or whatever they said. I have one more thing that I wanted to say, not because it is an answer to the question, but because in my research I found it interesting. And that is a Cherokee myth of where fire came from. And I just wanted to include it because I found it interesting. And so I'm gonna read my summary of it here for you. So the world was cold, and the thunders sent their lightning to put fire at the bottom of a hollow sycamore tree, which grew on an island. So all the animals could see the smoke coming from the top, and they needed the fire because it was cold, but they couldn't reach the fire because of the water. So they all got together and held council. The water spider said he would bring the fire back, but no one listened to him. And the raven offered, but when he landed on the tree, the heat scorched his feathers and turned them black. He was frightened away. And again, the water spider said that he would bring the fire back, but still no one listened to him. And the screech owl looked down into the tree, and the smoke turned his eyes red, and he was frightened away. And again, no one listened to the water spider. The horned owl went, and by the time he reached it, the tree was ablaze, and the smoke made white rings around his eyes, and he was frightened away. So at this point, none of the birds wanted to go, but a black snake went. I guess spoilers, the black snake becomes black later, because when it's swimming around in the tree, the ash turns him black, and he was frightened away. But the world was still cold. None of the animals would go. And the water spider still said that he could bring the fire back. No one listened. But when no one else would go, the water spider spun his silk into a bowl and put a single coal into it, carrying it back, and this is how fire was brought to the world.
I love that. I love
yeah.
that.
That's neat.
Yeah. And I was trying to find an example of the specific spider mentioned because it's like the rest of them. It was supposed to explain a design on the animal, but I couldn't find a good picture of it. But I guess this is often told to kind of teach the moral. It's kind of a fable, I suppose. The moral that like you shouldn't underestimate people. Just because they're like small or just because you are making an assumption about them or something.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Is the water spider, the other animals tell the water spider not to go and they don't listen to him because he is so small? Like, is that part of the original story?
It's because he's small and because the birds are like, we can do it, we can fly. So it's sort of a combination of underestimating the small creature and also everyone being overconfident in their own ability. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's not answering the question. It's a way to solve the question. In my family lore, when the smoke comes at you around a campfire, you have to say, I hate rabbits, I hate rabbits, I hate rabbits. And then the smoke won't come at you anymore. So I'm sharing it now with all of you. So hopefully it doesn't lose its magical powers. But for my life, that's what we've always done. And it works about 40% of the time.
It is fascinating that you said that because I came across an article that it was like a blog post from someone who said that. And
no way.
Did you write the blog post, Sydney?
No, I did not. So my aunt told me this story years and years ago. Like I was, I don't know, maybe 10. We were camping, obviously. And so she told me that story. And so like for years, I've always done it. The rest of the family's always done it. And I've told it to many, many people over the years around various campfires. And never has anyone else heard of it, except, of course, for my family. So I just assumed my aunt made it up. But that's so funny.
Well, that's wild because I didn't include it in my notes because it looked like it was just like some anecdotal story from someone else's personal like family background.
Yeah.
Right.
But as soon as you said rabbits, I was like, I literally I should have written that down. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. I would love to know the mythology of it. I also did not look into it preparing today because I've talked about it to a lot of different people over the years and no one's ever heard of it. So I just assumed it was something that my aunt made up. But I guess not. I guess she too heard it from someone else.
That's interesting because like,
come from,
why rabbits of all things?
I don't know.
And who would hate a rabbit? Poor rabbit.
Well, the fire just wants you to tell it that you hate rabbits, I guess. So.
Right. Well, I know rabbits can also have a lot of spiritual meaning too. So maybe it goes back to that. Like if a spirit from the fire is reaching out to you, and you say something about, hating the rabbits, maybe it, angers the fire spirit. And so then the fire spirit goes after someone else. I don't know. I don't know why it is the way it is. It just is.
Well, I don't have an answer prepared now, but I'm definitely going to look into this when we're done here.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Another thing that I came across was other superstitions related to campfires. And, I guess there's a decent amount of people in the Appalachian area that kind of have like the old wives' tale sort of farmers urban legend, I guess, that you can predict the weather from the sound that a campfire makes.
Oh, interesting.
So the reason that it's very clearly superstition is that every one of these reports that I read, they all have their own interpretation of what specific things mean.
Gotcha.
So I didn't like write down any like this means this, etc. But if it's crackling, it kind of sounds like somebody is walking through thick snow, so it's going to snow. And if it's whistling, it's going to be windy and perhaps a tornado and stuff like that. And so I just jotted down just 2 examples of campfire sounds, and this might be interesting to some people, but like when logs crackle, the reason for this is that there is resin in the wood and it will heat up and kind of be a mini explosion.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
which creates a crackling noise. And then like another really common one is whistling, because if there's moisture, it will heat up and evaporate and turn to steam,
Mm.
and that can create a whistling sound or a sizzling,
Like a teapot.
like teapot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
escaping from a tiny opening.
No, that totally makes sense about the resin because pine wood, pine has a lot of sap in it, especially if it's not that
yeah,
old, cracks and pops when you burn it. So it makes sense.
yeah, pine is a very crackly wood.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's what I have most of in my yard, so that's what we burn mostly. I guess it's not the best for heating a house because people don't like the smell.
That's funny because I think pine trees smell really good.
I do too. I was just gonna say, like, what a weird thing. I would say you wouldn't want to burn it in your house because like it pops out ashes and stuff, but I think the smell is very
Oh, yeah,
pleasant.
yeah. Maybe it's just too much of a good thing.
I think it might be that it's like smoke. It might be that it's less healthy to burn or something like that. But most people who have wood burning furnaces, you have to deal a lot with ventilation and stuff. So that's probably a
Sure.
consideration.
Sure. They make it toasty though. They make it very warm inside.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's like one of those things where, being that I don't have a fireplace, I have no idea what makes good wood for that kind of thing. So,
Sure.
There is a fireplace in my house, but it has not been cleaned, I think, since I've been alive. So we don't burn anything in it.
No, yeah, no roasting popcorn in that one.
Yeah. I've thought about it but it seems like a lot of work I don't really heat my house with wood, so
Yeah,
Yeah, it's more the ambiance at that point.
yeah.
there was one other thing I was thinking about, and that was just the fact that sometimes a fire just really likes you and it wants to be your friend, and the only way that it really knows how to communicate is to reach out with the one thing that can leave the fire, and that is the smoke. Just wants to be pals.
I like
Aw.
that you opened with spite and now you got to it wants to be friends.
Yeah, yeah, those are actually next to each other in my show notes, which I think is very funny.
That's good.
Take care of your fire; it'll take care of you.
I think of like Howl's Moving Castle, the Billy Crystal
Oh,
character,
yes,
Calcifer.
Calcifer. Yeah.
Every time I have a fire, I am reminded of that because I'm like looking at the fire, and like if I put wood in the fire, I'm feeding it and like keeping it alive and stuff, and I'm like imagining it being this creature.
Yeah.
That's just me, maybe. I don't know.
No, I mean, I get it because it like consumes and grows like a creature in a way. It's obviously it's not alive, but it like, I don't know. It's easy for humans to personify like anything. So
That's true.
When it again, I think it goes back to oftentimes fires are at night. You can't really see a lot, so you kind of see like the swirls of the smoke here and there. It starts looking like different shapes, and yeah.
Oh yeah.
Pareidolia.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that right?
That's how I pronounce it. I don't know. I've never actually heard it out loud.
I say that word more than I should without knowing how to actually say it.
What does this word mean?
That's the sort of human tendency to be able to see faces in just about anything. Like our brains are super hardwired to recognize faces. And so we see them everywhere, like on the moon and like in a piece of toast.
Right.
Well, before we move on to the second question, I wanted to tell everyone about another one of my favorite animals. Today, I want to share with you the Malabar giant squirrel, or rainbow squirrel. I want to say the rainbow squirrel is a real animal that actually exists.
I assume all of these are real animals that actually exist, right?
Well, I was going to say that isn't necessarily a required criteria for being included in this segment.
Oh, fair enough.
I want to leave it open. I might do griffins at some point. I don't know. It is actually worth mentioning specifically for this animal because in recent years, pictures of this animal have been accused of being artificially generated or colored in Photoshop. But there actually are rainbow squirrels. They live in the forests of India, particularly in the Western Ghats. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and parts of central India. And the most mind-blowing thing about this is they're not actually even rare. They just don't interact with humans a lot because their population depends on them being in undisturbed forests.
Oh, okay.
But the Indian giant squirrel, or the rainbow squirrel, can grow up to 3 feet long, including their tails, with a body length of generally 15 to 19 inches.
That's pretty big.
So almost, that's pretty big. It's a pretty big squirrel. It's almost 2 feet long, ignoring the tail.
Man.
And their fur comes in shades of black, brown, orange, maroon, and even purple.
Phew.
Though we aren't certain, researchers believe that their colorful fur helps them camouflage against dappled light through the treetops, making them harder for birds of prey to spot, even though they look pretty vibrant when we look at them on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And they've actually noted that when threatened, they have a tendency to remain motionless against tree trunks, blending into their surroundings. So this is kind of where that theory comes from.
Mm-hmm.
They actually rarely come to the ground, and they can leap up to 20 feet between branches of trees. Their diet consists mainly of fruits, nuts, seeds, and flowers, occasionally insects and bird eggs. And really, none of this information is doing justice to what is so awesome about them. So at this point, I have to urge you to just look up a picture of the Malabar giant squirrel because they're just beautiful.
Yeah.
So that is one of my favorite animals.
Yeah, definitely look it up. It's very cool.
Yeah, I looked up a picture of it and I was like, I also was like, nah, that can't be what it actually looks like. But it is. It's very cool looking.
Yeah, and a lot of people, probably mostly in America, I've seen trends of people saying this animal isn't real, this is photoshopped.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't fake. It is a real animal.
Yeah.
We do have a second question to talk about, and we might as well just jump into that. Question 2 comes to us from Christy. What would an organization like OSHA look like in a world with superheroes and supervillains?
So this really excites me because in my day job, I deal with safety, industrial safety. So I think about OSHA a lot.
Oh.
So in like a practical, like every day, how do we apply these rules? So I'm really excited to talk about it in the super world.
That's fun. Okay. Well, here's... I promised Jim that I was going to say something that made me sound like a killjoy for this answer. And I don't think it's going to be too bad. But the first thing I thought was it really depends how the superheroes and supervillains are organized in this world, because a lot of times superheroes are vigilantes and they aren't actually employed. So there's a decent chance in some stories that OSHA wouldn't really change.
No, that
see.
is an excellent point, because independent contractors are not subject to OSHA rules. So you're very, very true.
There's my killjoy answer, I promise.
No, that's actually a really good answer, and also has nothing to do with any of the things I looked at.
That's okay. I have other things to say too, but that was one point I wanted to talk about.
Even if we stick with that idea of they have to be part of an organization, I still feel like there's enough villains that are organized, and like if you look at like the Despicable Me trilogy, that's the one that comes immediately to mind. Like they're roughly organized into like groups of I mean, I guess they're villains more than like superheroes, but like they're still, I feel like, groups of organized, or like the Incredibles have like an organized group.
I did want to go into a little bit about literally what you just mentioned, because I have seen this idea explored in various comic books, but interestingly enough, it's always explored in kind of like satirical or spoof comics. So this is a whole rant, I suppose, but in Marvel's Civil War from 2006, the United States introduced something called the Superhuman Registration Act. And this was referenced in the MCU, but they really didn't explore it as much as they did in the comics of the time. And the idea was that all superpowered individuals were required to register with the government, undergo training, and work under supervision, which would be similar to getting licensing for hazardous jobs and stuff. And they explored the political ramifications of that, obviously making an ethical metaphor. And they also explored the implication that this meant all superheroes were governed by the United States government specifically, which had, of course, global ramifications.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't really explored very much, other than in some side stories with characters such as She-Hulk, where they dealt with like the bureaucratic side of workplace safety and superhero typesetting. And like I said, these were always kind of spoofs of superhero universes. But I will avoid ranting about how great She-Hulk is. So
that it's interesting because one of my touch points for organized superhero / supervillains, and I guess more towards the supervillain side of things, is the Venture Brothers and the Guild of Calamitous Intent. And there's not really much in the way of workplace safety on either side of those. In fact, under certain rulings, you are allowed to just kill each other. There's a lot of red tape that goes into killing somebody, though, and you can be on the hook for quite a lot of legal trouble if you do, depending on a lot of factors. But so yeah, like the idea of them following certain rules and making sure that they do things by a certain book is certainly something that I am familiar with, and it's kind of a fun thing to touch on in media. I think it's kind of a really interesting take on the whole superhero supervillain thing.
It lends itself to satire very well, because usually if you're getting that nitty gritty, it's going to point out how ridiculous the concept of superheroes is. And there's like really no good way around that.
Yeah.
Which is another side rant that this is not across the board, but sometimes I avoid conversations that are exploring how real world superheroes would be different from what we read in the comics. Because superheroes are a genre, and there's a certain level of suspension of disbelief that I like to keep, because superheroes are fun.
Right.
I'm thinking about OSHA because this is what I do outside of this podcast, about reportability and injuries. So like some superheroes have the ability to like super heal. So even though they might be out on the streets getting shot or falling off of buildings, at the end of the day, they didn't go and get medical help. They didn't need medical remedies. Therefore, that was not an OSHA reportable accident. So I feel like that aspect would still definitely apply.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, like you're saying before, if someone gets killed, like that's a different level there.
Right. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that is if you, even regardless, because one of the notes that I made, if you don't look at like a guild or a Legion of Doom or something like that, super villains are criminals, right? And even though some of them might be varied levels of organized, they're still probably not worried about complying with safety regulations.
Fair.
What's interesting about that is in a world where this existed, even if there wasn't such an OSHA analog for superheroes, it would still be really important for like insurance companies to say, hey, there are people who could just randomly blow up your house. So that's a thing you need to be covered for.
Right.
So like they're not covering the superheroes necessarily, but like people would have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's actually the direction that I went when I was doing a lot of research. I was thinking of if I had to work in a workplace in a place like Metropolis, for instance, what would OSHA do to make sure that the folks that worked at my workplace were completely safe, at least as safe as possible? And so I took a little look at what OSHA does, and I tried to transpose that onto a superhero setting. And one of the things that I was looking at was just the amount of training that they would probably have to write for, what do you do when the superhero and supervillain have a really big fight right outside of your building? Do you have a shelter in place plan?
I'm thinking of like the active shooter trainings.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd have to do
Yeah.
active supervillain training.
Right. That's
Right.
exactly what I was thinking of. That or like tornado drills or things like there would have to be drills. You would have to do this. Like it'd be 2 p.m.
that
on a
makes sense.
Thursday and they'd be like, it's time to do our superhero drill.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. What happens like if there's an epic fight happening and the roof is gone? It would be a problem. You'd have to have contingency plans and emergency action plans. It would be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
collateral damage.
I would expect that the local OSHA branch, I don't actually know if there's like branches to OSHA, but like somebody local to this city would probably have to have done a lot of research on what the superpowers are for the villains and the heroes so that they know what kind of contingency they have to plan for. Because if your local superheroes and villains don't have an ice power, you don't have to worry about ice. Or if they don't have wind power, then you're good on wind. So they might be able to tailor their training and planning to certain individual villains and heroes so that they don't have to waste a lot of time, like basically training everyone on everything.
Yeah. So like your local safety person would have to read all of the OSHA superhero rules because the OSHA is a bigger body. So OSHA must have the rules for the ice powers and the invisibility powers and the super strength powers. But you as whoever the individual company's safety person is would have to just know, okay, well, in this area, only the superheroes have, strength powers or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting that all the encyclopedic knowledge that many comic book fans have would then be a marketable skill.
Oh, yeah.
I actually know that if Magneto were to do this, these are the ways you could stop him. It's like, oh, now we actually need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded more derogatory toward comic book fans than I meant it to. I am a nerd, just so everyone knows.
Not only that, but it's also accurate.
No, also, I want to go back to something you said before, Derek, about like the insurance companies needing to be more up on this than anyone else, and how the supervillains are kind of criminals and they don't really care. But if you're in a super world where the villains are in syndicates or organized, and you're a villain, I think, and I could be wrong here, but I think the villain would want to work in the organization that has the better safety program. Because if you're a villain, you want to do chaos, but you don't want to die. So you want to go to the group that has more safety regulations so that you can do chaos, but not die.
Ah, okay.
Makes sense.
So I think that's another area where safety in the world of superheroes and supervillains could prevail.
Mm-hmm.
I think the superheroes would be in favor of safety prevailing.
Probably. I was thinking that you would also have to have on hand a lot of different kinds of PPE. And again, I feel like it would also depend on what kind of superpowers you're dealing with here. Because, if you have the PPE on hand for things like acid, then, or I should say, if your villains and heroes have acid powers, you'll want the PPE for acid, but you might not need the one for fire, for instance. Sure. Although you have to watch because sometimes superheroes get brand new villains. This occurs on an occasion. So
it's true, and they probably cover that with some policy where it's like unforeseen supervillain emergence, and that costs extra.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so OSHA has a thing called the General Duty Clause. It's very important. It basically says every employer has a duty to protect all of its employees from other types of recognized hazards that emerge or are likely to emerge. So it's kind of like the catch-all for OSHA. So like even if there's a hazard in the workplace that hasn't been explicitly outlined in the many, many levels of OSHA regulations that exist, this general duty clause exists so that you still have to protect your workers. So it would be like that for emerging powers. It would be like all of these very detailed, regulations exist for the known powers. But if new powers become a thing, you still have to protect your people.
Mm-hmm.
There is a term in filmmaking called shoe leather, which is, if you've ever watched a movie where people pick up a phone and notice that they don't say hello, who is this, how are you, and like do the small talk. They just pick up a phone and say, we got to go do this thing. Okay, see you there, and then they hang up. That's called shoe leathering. They're cutting out the unnecessary bits for the purpose of pacing in a story.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's what we do with insurance and OSHA type things in superhero stories, is we just assume it's taken care of because that's not the exciting bit of the story.
Yeah.
Right.
That reminds me of there was an episode of the Powerpuff Girls where, I can't remember exactly why this is the case, but they moved to the town of Citiesville.
Yes.
And they were like, oh, we'll be superheroes. We'll do our thing here. And they immediately try to go thwart a bank robbery. And the bank robbers were going across the bridge in their car. And they blow up the bridge. And the mayor calls the three girls into his office. And he's like, the bank robbers stole about $450. And you blew up a bridge that cost $2 million. I am signing a law that says you are not allowed to use superpowers. Get out of my office.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, that's, we brought up Invincibles. That's when superheroes were banned because...
Oh, the Incredibles?
Incredible,
okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Mr. Incredible, is that his name?
Yeah.
Mr. Incredible saved someone who didn't want to be saved, and so he sued him.
Yeah.
And that meant they didn't want to be liable for superheroes being sued anymore. And it's interesting that I think I've read a decent amount of them. Venture Brothers was another one, but as I mentioned, there are a lot of like spoof, kind of like accentuating the ridiculousness of a world with superheroes. And I think in my experience, The Incredibles, them doing that, also the exploration of, I don't design superhero costumes with capes because they can get caught in, like, those are the same kind of silly parody nature, but I think The Incredibles is like the most serious look at that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't point it out to be ridiculous. It actually is the catalyst of the movie. So that's kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah. There is I think in The Watchmen, one of the like original generation Watchmen died because they got their cape caught in a revolving door and they got gunned down
at a bank heist.
Yeah.
Yep.
So capes may be a bad choice, actually, since we're on the topic.
But they look cool when you're flying.
It's true.
That factored into my, like, I don't want to explore the danger of wearing a cape because I want superheroes to look cool and be exciting and stuff. But I knew eventually we were going to bring up Alan Moore. Thank you, Jim. This whole conversation is either let's point out comic books being ridiculous and silly, or let's get nitty gritty and turn into Alan Moore. I don't want to do that. I don't know enough about OSHA. That's all the stuff that Sydney has now told us about OSHA's policies and stuff. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. OSHA's a fascinating world. I can tell you more if you ever are curious.
I think curiosity is not the problem. I think my ability to comprehend legal terms is where I, like, that's where I'll like base out.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the thing about OSHA. Like, it is a legal document. They are federal, regulations for the United States, but how they're implemented, looks different from company to company.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, even though most of the regulations are pretty, like, I can't think of a good one right now, but like talks about ladders. Like, there's certain ways you have to build a ladder, but like how you train your employees on the proper way to go up and down a ladder would be up to the company. So that's why, like, it's really interesting to me in the super world because, say a OSHA exists. So they're just creating all these regulations, but then each company, each city, each state, each town, whatever, they have to decide, okay, what are the actual threats? What do I actually have to train on? And then, if you're the company that employs the superheroes, then you have that whole element too. Like, okay, now what do I got to tell my super employees that they can and can't do because I can't have more problems?
You know what is interesting about that? Because if you look at something like the Justice League or S.H.I.E.L.D., the way that they depict them could be similar to the way we depict the CIA or the FBI in movies and stuff. And we completely ignore the fact that in real life, a lot of those people are just behind desks a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. But also, I'm not positive on this, but I do think like the CIA and like federal organizations like that don't necessarily have to follow all the same OSHA rules for like field work. I don't think they have to be as concerned. I'm not positive because I don't work in those organizations, but I think they're a little more lenient.
Well, that'd be similar to like, it's a different kind of training, right? Because you're dealing with threats and stuff. So you're not going to be teaching them how to avoid an active shooter, for example. You're going to be teaching them how to disable an active shooter.
Sure.
Which I guess is an important distinction. And then you mentioned some superheroes have the ability to heal or just are impervious to damage. And then do we need Superman to wear a hard hat?
Right, exactly.
Are we following the spirit or the letter of the rule here?
Yeah, if I know my employee can't be hurt, does he still need to wear the proper PPE?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Like, if my person can fly, do I need to have him in a harness when he goes on top of the crane? Like,
I could genuinely see somebody making the case that Superman is setting an example for children, so he should always wear his protective vest and stuff. I don't know.
Right. I like it.
One of the things I was thinking of in a very similar line is the idea that just like if there was a union of supervillains, then they might use OSHA guidelines as a checklist of bad things to do.
Yeah.
Like they just go around and running around, turning on all the gas taps and just filling the building with natural gas and, making sure that they remove all the big red stop buttons on the machines so you can't slap them with your free hand.
Yeah, they re-energize things when people are still working on them, cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
Man.
We just have an organization of the gremlin from the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Like, go take that plane apart. But people are in it. Yes, we're villains.
Yeah, it would be the most mundane type of crime, but it would be so chaotic on the ground. Like, sure, you won't take over the city or the world or the tri-state area, but you will cause a lot of pain and suffering.
I'm going to disable the entire production line. Mwahahaha.
I like I can't think of an example other than Professor Chaos from South Park.
Oh, yeah.
I know there are other examples of characters who kind of do this, but like the character who like wants to be a supervillain, but what they do is go around and cause minor inconveniences to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean, it's like
that's
a little bit
character.
like Dr. Doofenshmirtz on Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah. That's a good one.
I mean, everyone's got to get their start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
The anti-OSHA.
Yeah. It's a good name for a supervillain group.
I mean, I could see it happening.
One of the other things that I wanted to mention before we wrap up is just the fact that it's interesting that OSHA deals more with the legal aspects of things. So, OSHA will come in and make sure you're complying with things, and they will let you know when you're not.
Yes.
But I think there is a deeper question to be had here, and this is something maybe we should throw into the questions channel because I think it might merit its own episode. But just the idea of what kind of building codes might you see? What are some of the things that you would have to, build into your structures to make sure they can withstand some kind of fight like this? Because I know that when you live in places that are prone to earthquakes, the building codes are very, very different than they are in places that do not get earthquakes. Or if you live in a place that gets hurricanes, the building standards are way different than, if you live in a place that really doesn't get any kind of strong wind whatsoever. So that's sort of what I thought I was going to be answering going into this. And then I read what OSHA actually does, and I was like, oh, this is a totally different question. But I think that would be fun to talk about someday. So we should put it on the question list.
Well, we can put it on in there. I mean, I do think it comes down to what we've said a couple times, that like it would have to be regional. It would have to be like what supervillains or what super powered creatures do exist in this area. And
yeah, because I mean, all the supervillains seem to congregate around Gotham City and Metropolis, and there really don't seem to be any in Gary, Indiana, for instance.
Right.
I would just live in Gary, Indiana.
Yeah, it's the town that knew me when.
But there is right now, I think it's a Tide commercial. It might be Gain. It's some laundry detergent commercial, and I keep getting it. And it's like the Hulk throws something, and then they're like at a convention, and they end up with like stuff on their clothes because the Hulk threw something, and like that's the ad is like the Hulk. I don't remember what they say, but they're like, Hulk gets mad, but your clothes can stay clean. So it's kind of like what we've been talking about. Like, how do you prepare when you're the collateral citizens in this world of superheroes fighting?
Yeah. I feel like I would have to carry around a whole messenger bag full of just superhero and supervillain supplies that, like, oh, you know, today I got scalded by fire guy, and so I need to put this burn patch on.
Well, the amount of training paramedics are going to have to add to what they're already trained to do.
True.
There's a lot that in addition to your building code, like I almost feel like it's kind of at some point we'll just do a continuation of this conversation is what it is, because there's so many different ways to explore.
I just love the concept of an OSHA training video that's like, so I guess that today's the day that you finally got hit by a falling building. Well, there are ways to prevent this, and you should have listened to us when you had the chance. Let's take a look.
That's what we need is the passive aggressive training videos that are like, no, if you had done it right.
Yeah. My wife, I think I mentioned this before, but for a while, they kept sending my wife at her job a bunch of anti-phishing and email scamming videos that starred a superhero. And it was very much that same like passive aggressive, like, well, if you had done this, then you would have been just fine. And I love the idea that they would make those for supervillains and superheroes.
Don't be this guy. Instead, follow the rules.
Yeah. Oh, human ice pop turn you into a popsicle? Well, you should have went to the shelter, buddy.
The human ice pop.
I would love to have a whole series of supervillains and superheroes that have absolutely ridiculous names but fairly normal powers. Like, human ice pop is just a guy with ice powers. But he's got a stupid name.
Human ice pop.
I have it was Potassium Man was the one I came up with.
What does Potassium
all
Man
the powers
do?
of potassium.
He can do anything potassium can do, and the main thing that he does
is explode in water.
Is make things explode in water. That's the most significant thing he can do. But he can also like give you a marginal amount of energy.
Can his costume be a banana? It's
like a yellow. I've drawn a picture of him before, but yeah, it has bananas in it. Yes.
Good.
Love it.
It's a dumb character, but
I like it. I'm on board.
Potassium Man versus the human ice pop.
Have we done a question where we've talked about the absolute stupidest powers you could have?
I feel like we've done variations of it, but we could probably do another one.
I mean, I feel like Potassium Man could do some good. He'd just have to like learn how to think laterally.
Well, I came up with that as I was looking at, we did a question once that was like, if you could do element bending with the actual elements on the periodic table, like what are the most interesting things you could do? So go check out that episode, listeners.
Yeah, we'll have to find it and put it in the show notes.
Yeah. So listeners, this week, let us know, do you need insurance coverage for your tiny annoying curse?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. If you have any thoughts on that or anything else that we talked about, you could email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. And also, you could comment on our blog, or you could like us on Facebook, or you could follow us on Blue Sky @vaguelyscientific. Hey, Jim, where do we get all these wacky questions?
We get them from you, the listeners. And if you, the listener, have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, and all the other cool places that podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out. And so does telling your friends.
Yeah, and as you all know, campfire smoke follows people who don't listen to Vaguely Scientific.
Oh, that explains it. That actually makes perfect sense. Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. It's spring, so it's time to get all your cool t-shirts.
Yeah, and skateboards.
And you know what? I have not really been pushing the skateboards in the last couple months, so
I know, I missed it.
It's been winter, so who's going around skating? Unless you're in Australia or New Zealand or wherever, you know. Maybe you do some winter skating.
Places.
Yeah. They don't have skateboarding in Gary, Indiana.
Oh. Well, thank you to Sydney for being our guest this week.
Absolutely. Always a fun time.
Yay. For Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
Oh, and I'm Sydney. Darn it.
Yay.
One day I will remember.
That's okay. That's okay. Hey, come back next time. We'll be here waiting by the phone.
Toodaloo, everyone.
Yeah, please listen to us.
We're so lonely.
And I'm going to open my stopwatch. Not the weather app, but the stopwatch. I don't know why my phone is tied, that it ties the stopwatch to the weather app.
Huh.
Like, what is that? Why is that even a thing?
Yeah, I can't think of a good reason for that one.
Because you need to time the clouds so you can better predict the weather.
I guess so, yeah.